one of the mistakes the 9/11 Truth Movement makes is the dismissal of hijackers that were involved in the September 11th attacks. This is a huge mistake made by these people. Without hijackers, who do you blame? Who are involved with the September 11th attacks. And I'm going to talk about two hijackers where you should actually do background checks on and investigations of your own. And these two people have the fingerprints of intelligence behind them, foreign and domestic. And this is your doorway into actually holding people accountable for the terrorist attacks of September 11th from even happening. Even if we can't get complicity, there is at least, the very least, foreknowledge. And these two people are Mohamed Atta and Ziad Jarrah. And both of these people are suspected to be pilot hijackers. Mohamed Atta for American Airlines Flight 11, and for Ziad Jarrah, United Airlines Flight 93. And I'm going to do a little bit of a summary regarding both of these people. I'm not going to get too detailed behind it. But I just want to show the erroneous ways of some people in the truth movement who cater to the belief that these hijackers had no involvement with the September 11th attacks. With Mohamed Atta, he actually grew up in the Kafir Governorate in Egypt. His father was a lawyer. His mother was a well-to-do housewife. Her parents were pretty well off. So they lived a very comfortable lifestyle, more often than most in Cairo. Atta actually grew up in a moderate Sunni household. Their parents weren't very overtly religious at all. Atta had very little interest in studying Islam. He actually was a decent student at best growing up. And one day his father had two German school teachers that he met previously in the year over for dinner. And they heard about Atta wanting to travel to a university. And they actually told him about a technical school in Germany to endorse his time with. And so in 1992, he actually went to applied sciences school in Germany. It was here that he traveled and found Al-Quds Mosque in Hamburg in 1995, and he became friendly with the imam there called Mohammed Fazizi. Fazizi has a very nefarious past. He has links with Hamas, is known to be a fervent Salafi jihadi preacher, anti-imperialistic, anti-Americanism, and anti-Israel. And most of his preachments held on Friday and Saturday are very vicious in regards to anybody who isn't Sunni Islamic. And this is a Wahhabi-based mosque. Al-Quds actually gets funding from Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia itself is the founder of Wahhabi Islam. It actually is created in part due to its founder, Muhammad ibn Abdul al-Wahhab, who is the founder, of course, of Wahhabi Islam, which is quite fervent and ultra-Orthodox. Atta actually becomes a radical fundamentalist between the years 1995 to 97. His teacher, Dietmar Muschel, actually, who is in which he wrote his thesis regarding Syria, notices a transformation, the slow transformation of Atta becoming a very shy introvert into a radical fundamentalist. On to Ziad Jarrah. Ziad Jarrah actually grew up in the Tanakh district of Beirut, Lebanon. His father and mother actually were secular. They didn't have any religious preachments, even though they were considered Sunni. These were very, very moderate Sunnis, and they weren't at all very religious. He went to a Christian moderate school, middle school, in Beirut. He actually had Jewish and Christian friends. He was known to be a very promiscuous young man in his late teens. And he actually decides to go with his cousin to Germany to study engineering. Actually, incidentally, in his younger years, Ziad Jarrah actually implied that he wanted to be a pilot, but his father actually dissuaded him from it because he thought it was a very dangerous occupation. Incidentally enough, according to his father, after the September 11 attacks, he's quoted as saying that he was afraid Ziad Jarrah would actually crash the plane because of his nerves. So Ziad Jarrah actually goes to Greifswald University in Greifswald, Germany. And it's actually here he meets with somebody named Abdul Rahman al-Makdisi. Abdul Rahman al-Makdisi actually is a imam at the Greifswald Mosque. He's under investigation by the German BFV, which is the German Intelligence Bureau, for his links with not just Hamas, but also for his preachments about radical fundamentalism. And he's actually under investigation there. And they actually have a file regarding Ziad Jarrah as early as 1995 because of his direct association with Abdul Rahman al-Makdisi. In 1996, he actually moves into a house owned by an older woman, and here he meets Aziel Zinguin from the University of Greifswald. And at no point does Ziad Jarrah actually live with anybody that he meets intimately. Even though he is in love with Aziel Zinguin and she's in love with him, he never actually lives with her. And so he then travels to Hamburg, Germany, on the request of Abdul Makdisi, who connects him with an individual named Marcel K. Now, Marcel K is a very mysterious figure, and Marcel K will play a big role in Ziad Jarrah from this point onwards, because whenever Ziad Jarrah is in trouble or he has he's into a troubling thought of his life where he's meeting with his parents, or he's meeting with his girlfriend, or he's thinking about certain things that that's troubling him, he always calls Marcel K. Marcel K actually is an imam over in Germany. He's also a general directorate of a warehouse, and he also is monitored by the German BFV for his links into terrorist-related activity in Germany and in Afghanistan. At this point, Ziad Jarrah actually goes to the Al-Quds Mosque. Now, years later, the FBI actually states that that's where he becomes part of the Hamburg cell, meeting with Mohamed Atta and Ramzi bin al-Shibh and Marwan al-Shehi, Monir el-Montasek, and Saeed Bahaji. These are all people involved with Al-Quds Mosque. But on September 13th, at a German website called Der Spiegel, it is stated that at the German BFV claims that there is no direct link with Ziad Jarrah and members of the Hamburg cell, only that the FBI is suggesting so. End quote. And that was a quote in Der Spiegel in the English translation. And I find this to be rather true, because I'll tell you why. Mohamed Atta, going back to him, meets with two very important people at the Al-Quds Mosque. And these are people that are not really publicly known, but are very important assets. And they are Mohammed Haidar Zamar and Marmoun Darkanzali. Both are Syrian, but they live in Germany, and they have high contacts with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. They both know terrorist cells in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Germany, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. These are gun runners, money launderers, big-time criminals. Haidar Zamar actually insinuates that Mohamed Atta should live in a house which is afforded to him, and he actually lives with Ramzi bin al-Shibh and Saeed Bahaji and Mohamed Atta often comes and visits them and closely monitors them. And of course, Mohamed Darkanzali, who's actually a warehouse distributor, actually works with Atta. So both Darkanzali and Mohamed Atta are closely linked with Atta and Ramzi bin al-Shibh and the Hamburg cell itself. And so they create the cell under the tutelage of both of these men. Now, of course, not only is the German BFV following Mohamed Atta and Mohamed Darkanzali, but so is the CIA. And that's because Darkanzali and Mohamed Atta know military commander of Al-Qaeda, Mohamed Atta, personally. They also know Mohammed Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. I'm sorry for the stutter. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who is not part of Al-Qaeda at this point yet, but is a known terrorist operative for Qatar, for Pakistan, and he has links going back as far back as Afghanistan with Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, who told him to come to Afghanistan, where he worked for him. Sayyaf, who's a major league warlord for Hizb Islami. Now, going back to Ziad Jarrah, all of a sudden, is slowly becoming a radical fundamentalist himself, just like Atta was. Meanwhile, at no point in his upbringing was he ever religious, was he ever taught by his parents or his teachers or his loved ones about Wahhabi Islam or radical fundamentalism. But yet, when he goes to the Al-Quds Mosque on the orders from Abdul Rahman al-Makdisi, all of a sudden, he turns into this radical fundamentalist that his girlfriend even acknowledges has become this big surprise in their lives, in their relationship. Yet she still sticks with him. Ziad Jarrah is still moving from house to house, never living with Mohamed Atta or Ramzi bin al-Shibh or anybody from the Hamburg cell. So take that in mind. At no point is he living with these people. Atta is actually living with Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Sayyid Baji, and then in the year 2000, Mohamed Atta travels to Afghanistan. And this is important. He travels to Tanak Farms, which is a terrorist training camp, and also a camp that was personally built by Osama bin Laden. And it was here that he finally meets with Ziad Jarrah. And this is the only evidence in recorded history where Mohamed Atta actually meets with Ziad Jarrah. Now, there's video of this, but the video has no sound. But the video is short, and it shows them both sitting together. And in it, if you can find the video, it's on archive.org. If it's still there. It's long been disappeared from the internet. And I don't know why, who knows, but maybe it's not as popular, maybe it's scrubbed, who knows, I'm not going to get into that. But the video itself shows both men reading a piece of paper. Now, there was a long, old YouTube account that I used to follow that had this video, and he was Arabic, and he actually saw the writing on the back of the paper, and it was in Arabic, and it said "The Will." And there was a video called "The Will," and it was a video regarding what was said on the piece of paper, and it was very, very vague. And since the paper was only seen on video for a couple of seconds, he can only just transcribe what it was saying. But basically, this was Ziad Jarrah's will. Now, there is also video, which is purported by the media, and also it's not very popular, but you could find it on YouTube. It's actually investigated by U.S. Department of Defense and the CIA and the FBI, where you could see Ziad Jarrah is actually laughing in his own video will. And that's what the video paper was about. It was about his will. But what was transcribed to the will, we'll never know. But in the video will, he can't even keep a straight face. He's laughing. He's nervous. And, of course, these are not qualities of a dedicated jihadi. There are other wills, video wills, that are out there in the public sphere. You can see them. You can download them on YouTube, Daily Motion. There's certain archive.org where certain video wills of the muscle hijackers were made. Now, I have a couple. They're Arabic, but some of them are English translated. But at no point in any of these wills were they laughing, they stammering, or they're nervous, but only with Ziad Jarrah. Now, this is important because this shows that Ziad Jarrah actually really either wasn't a dedicated jihadi, or was he something else? And I'll get back to it in a minute. Mohamed Atta comes into the United States, in Florida, with Marwan al-Shehhi, who's actually the suspected hijacker pilot of United Airlines Flight 175. They train at Huffman Aviation. They get their commercial airlines pilot licenses. They train on Boeing simulators. Remember, these guys aren't training to become Boeing airline pilots for a career. They're just learning how to take off. And so they don't have to be professional pilots. This is another question of inquiry regarding certain truth proponents of these movements that say, well, you know, they were terrible pilots, or that there's an organization called Pilots for 9/11 Truth that say that they did these impossible maneuvers, but meanwhile, there was no impossible maneuver. In fact, one plane they always talk about, American Airlines Flight 77, doing this long loop around Virginia and going back into Washington, D.C. to impact the western wall of the Pentagon. But that's not an impossible maneuver, crashing it. Although I don't necessarily dismiss the notion that maybe these planes were remotely controlled without the pilots noticing it. That could be very well true. I don't throw that out, but I don't say it's a fact either. It's just speculation, but it's something that I always kept in mind. Nevertheless, they don't have to be perfect pilots. They just have to crash the plane. And so with Mohamed Atta, he actually goes to Florida after Afghanistan. He goes to Florida with Marwan al-Shehhi, stays with him. Ziad Jarrah comes a little bit later, but he never stays with Mohamed Atta or Marwan al-Shehhi. He stays alone, lives alone. Now, if you were involved with the most important operation of your life, which involved your life personally, killing yourself, noting that this is an incredibly important operation where they had met with the biggest names of the terrorist underworld, Osama bin Laden, Mohamed Atta, the military commander-in-chief of Al-Qaeda, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ayman al-Zawahiri, supposedly the biggest names of Al-Qaeda or terrorist cells in the world. But Ziad Jarrah stays alone. Now, this is where the intelligence apparatus comes in, not just German apparatus abroad. Now, it's the Israeli apparatus. Now, I'm not saying that this is the fault of the Israelis, but you do have moving companies that had Israeli Mossad operatives inside them. Not all these people were professional Mossad soldiers or spying operatives. In fact, only 2 were recognized as being part of the Mossad, Sivan and Paul Kurzberg. But, you have Israeli nationals working for these moving companies that were here on temp visas, and they overstayed their visas, which is the reason why the 5 dancing Israelis went back to Israel. Wasn't because of anything involved with 9/11, but because of their temp visas, they overstayed them. And so they were deported back to Israel under pressure from 2 unnamed U.S. senators and, of course, Alan Dershowitz, who acted as a mediator. And so immediately as they enter the country, they go to Huffman Aviation, they get their pilot's licenses, and they travel all throughout the eastern United States, New York, New Jersey, Florida, Maryland, and so Oklahoma. And so in New York, there's a company called Urban Moving Systems. Urban Moving Systems is owned by Dominic Suter, or was owned by Dominic Suter, and it's a warehouse located in Weehawken, New Jersey. Now, why am I saying this? On the day of September 11th, some woman who lived in Doric Towers, it later came out to be, her name was Maria. I know her last name, but I'm not going to say it so people can bother her or whatever. But her last name is redacted in the FBI report. I'll keep it that way. Maria actually was, she got a phone call with a friend suggesting that she look outside, and because there's a lot of smoke coming from one of the Twin Towers, and Maria has a direct view. Direct Towers is right by Jersey City, and you could see the skyline of downtown Manhattan perfectly. And since Tuesday was a clear day, and she had binoculars, she was looking and she saw this huge gaping hole of the North Tower. And there's a parking lot just below where she lived. She lived high up in the Doric Tower. So she looked down and she saw these three guys celebrating. They were high-fiving. They were hugging each other, smoking cigarettes, and it says they were flicking lighters or whatever. Ryan Dawson, a researcher, a long-time researcher, actually has long reported on this subject many years ago before he even became famous. So credit to him and to other older researchers who report on the story. And so she calls the police, and so they leave. And when they leave, they're in a truck, an Urban Moving Systems truck that is on a nationwide bolo, or be on the lookout. And because Maria actually saw the lights plate to her binoculars, East Rutherford, New Jersey is where the truck was pulled over by a police officer named Scott DiCarlo. And so Scott DiCarlo actually gets them out. They don't want to come out of the truck. He's telling them to come out. They don't get out the truck, and so he forces them out, drags them out. And one of them actually says that we are not your problem. The Palestinians are your problem. Your problem are our problems. That's a pretty weird thing to say, actually, being pulled out of the truck. I would be like, what's going on here? And why am I being forcibly removed from my truck? And so, not to say that this is guilt of anything or suspicion of anything, but it is quite suspicious. And so when they pull these guys out of the truck, they find out that these are Israeli nationals. They're turned over to the FBI for investigation, and they're held at one police plaza for 72 days under investigation. And it finds out that they all lied on their when they took the lie detector tests, even though they declined not to take them initially. They were afforded a lawyer. The lawyer told them that there's no harm in taking it, but they actually failed. And when the FBI report came out later, it's redacted, but the FBI report came out later, there was an instance of the agent writing a report, who was redacted, by the way, and the question comes up, what affiliations do these nationals have with the September 11th terrorist attacks? And there was a page and a half redacted fully. Well, I can safely assert to you that a simple no affiliation would have not taken that much space. So even the FBI, who were vehement in investigating these guys fully, they were against having them deported back to Israel, suggesting that they knew more than what they were alluding to. And when the FBI detained two more Urban Moving Systems employees in Pennsylvania, which is hardly ever brought up. In fact, the only person I know that brought this story up is a fellow researcher who I highly admire, named DJ Thermal Detonator, who did a massive work regarding the Israeli moving systems and 9/11 in general, as well as the Lockerbie bombing and the 1993 World Trade Center attacks. I implore you, if you're not familiar with him, go and subscribe to him on YouTube, follow him on Twitter. He's also on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, but he's on Facebook. Follow him wherever you can. I respect him more than any other researcher in this subject. And we talk about this subject revolving the two Urban Moving System employees that were captured in Pennsylvania. And why is this important? Because they were both employees of Urban Moving Systems. They were both Mossad operatives. In fact, these two guys were working from us, the electronic wing of the Mossad. So these guys were actually much more important than the five dancing Israelis that everybody knows about. And these two guys' names are Modi Butbul and Roy Barak. And these two guys were actually pulled over by Pennsylvania State Police on September 11, 2001 and September 12, 2001. Now, on September 12th, when they were pulled over in York, Pennsylvania, by Pennsylvania State Police, they told them that they were in the process of moving somebody from Ohio, or is it Chicago? I could be wrong. It's one of those, to residence in New Jersey. Now, when they called Dominic Suter, the manager of Urban Moving Systems, and told them about this story, Dominic Suter told them that there were no clientele outside New Jersey because of the prior day's events. Why wasn't this actually investigated further? Incidentally enough, the route that they were taking from Ohio to New Jersey is the same route that is connecting to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Somerset County, where Flight 93 crashed. Why am I bringing that up? Well, because if we go back to Ziad Jarrah's background, you'll find something very interesting that these truth movements throw away because they don't believe in hijackers. Now, Ziad Jarrah has an uncle. His name is Ali Al-Jarrah. He lives in Lebanon. He's a school teacher. And in 2011, he was arrested by Lebanese authorities and Hezbollah in their investigation into the assassination of Hezbollah military commander Imad Mughniya. Imad Mughniya was killed by the CIA and the Israeli Mossad as they drone striked his car. That information led them to do a investigation into who killed Imad Mughniya and who would know about his whereabouts. And that led them to Ali Al-Jarrah. And under their investigation, Ali Al-Jarrah told them that he had been a spy for the Israeli government for 25 years. He has a brother, Joseph Al-Jarrah. He too was suspected of assisting Ali Al-Jarrah for 10 years in spying in Lebanon against Arabs for Hamas and Hezbollah. Ziad Jarrah has a cousin named Asim Al-Jarrah. This goes back even further than Ali Al-Jarrah. Asim Al-Jarrah was a spy for Syria, Iraq, Libya, Israel. Now, he also is involved with numerous organizations throughout the Middle East. He denies these charges, even though his own family even says that everybody in the family knows he's a spy for numerous organizations. He's known as a very flashy person. He drives these high-profile Mercedes and Lexuses and wears a lot of jewelry, buys expensive suits. Meanwhile, he says that money comes from his business adventures into the many warehouses he owns in Lebanon and in Syria. But meanwhile, under the Wahhabi bombing, which was suspected of being conducted by a Libyan person, the operation was entitled Operation Jarrah. Now, I'm not saying that Ziad Jarrah is an Israeli Mossad spy. I'm not saying that he is involved with spying at all. However, where there's smoke, there's fire. Now, to go furthermore into his background, at Flight 93, these truth movements who claim to say that this plane never crashed in Pennsylvania, that the phone calls made from these planes were faked, or that they were forced by the passengers on the ground in some unknown hangar by some unknown agencies or military people that they can't name. That's just made up. And they throw out all this evidence which contradicts the 9/11 Commission final report as well as the FBI pipe bomb investigation. Why? Because the phone calls made on those planes, 6 of them, were contradictory to the claim that there were 4 hijackers on those planes. The FBI and the 9/11 Commission report officially state that Ziad Jarrah was the pilot and that there were 3 muscle hijackers, Saeed Al-Ghamdi, Ahmed Al-Nami, and Ahmed Al-Haznawi. Okay? According to 6 of these phone calls made by passengers and crew and received by their loved ones and officials of United Airlines, they state that there were only 3 hijackers on these planes, and that all 3 of these guys were wearing red bandanas, and that all 3 of these guys were very dark-skinned males. They looked Egyptian, according to one call. I think that was Jeremy Glick. Google Ziad Jarrah. Does he look dark-skinned to you? Not to mention, in 2006, when they prosecuted Zacarias Basawi, the suspected 20th hijacker, for the events of September 11th, Flight 93, in which the truth movement states that never crashed to the ground, had its cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder survive the crash. This is important. Evidence that you throw away because you don't claim plane crashed here. When they got the data from the cockpit voice recorder and they transcribed it, the audio was played for the victim's family in a separate venue. And that they heard the passengers trying to get into the cockpit. They heard glass breaking. They heard one of the hijackers being killed, supposedly. So you got 2 guys in the cockpit and 1 guy outside the door who's wearing a bomb belt. And this is the only instance where a hijacker is wearing a bomb belt, according to the phone calls. Why is he wearing a bomb belt? Is it to make up for the lack of hijackers of the plane and to keep the people at bay from revolting? Sounds plausible to me. Anyway, the transcript is available online, and you could read it. And right before they crashed the plane, the person sitting next to the pilot is saying, "Saeed, up, down, Saeed, up, down." In other words, they were rocking the plane, putting it up and down. This was seen by a plane that was flying by United Flight 93. And the FAA was in contact with this plane, saying that this plane is rocking its wings. Well, they were trying to throw off the passengers from getting into the cockpit. Who's Saeed? Saeed Al-Ghamdi. Isn't he a muscle hijacker? What's he doing flying the plane? So, did Ziad Jarrah ever board the plane? Or was he an Israeli spy right down to the day itself, kept in close contact with the hijackers of this plane and with the hijacking team of other planes at a distance, because he always lived alone. He never lived with the hijackers, not once. Even at the hotel that they stood in New Jersey on September 6th to the day of September 11th, he rented a separate room for himself, room 468, while Saeed Al-Ghamdi, Ahmed Al-Hasnawi stood in 466. Why would he rent his own room? Why wouldn't he stay with the other hijackers? And when the FBI went into the room, they found this cardboard cutout of what looked like a cockpit itself. Is he showing them how to fly the plane? Because on the audio of the cockpit voice recorder, they're saying, the hijackers are saying in Arabic, which is transcribed into English, get the pilots back in here. Because when they take over the plane, they knock out the pilots or they hurt them. But they're the only hijacking team where they asked for the pilots for help. It's right there in the audio. And this is coming from the victims' families and from the U.S. government itself, whether they even realize the mistake that they're allowing us or not. Or was Ziad Jarrah really on the plane? I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm just telling you, if you want a link to foreign intelligence, U.S. intelligence, here and abroad, monitoring the hijackers, allowing them to conduct these operations. The CIA itself was monitoring Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi out west in San Diego and California. They never told the FBI. They never told the State Department. The Israeli Mossad that were following the Hamburg cell out east, they never told the State Department. And after the September 11 attacks, what happened? All these operatives from Saudi Arabia and Israel disappeared. went back to the countries of origin. So this way we can't prosecute them. And what took their place? The truth movement would rather go with the conspiracy theories purported by people like CIT, like Rebecca Roth, like a Barbara Honegger, and say that there were no hijackers whatsoever, that they never hijacked these planes, that the planes were actually drones outfitted to look like planes. Who are you blaming? You can't blame nobody at that point. It's a dead end. That's the reason why none of those people have ever gone further with their investigation into these revelations, these crazed revelations. And so I'm talking to the people of these truth movements in the hope of getting out of this dead end. And if you want a much more broader look into the intelligence apparatuses that were monitoring these hijackers, well, you have to start right at the basics, the hijackers themselves. Not all of them, but the pilots themselves, the two names I outlined for you today, Mohamed Atta, Ziad Jarrah. And the importance can't be understated regarding their involvement or their alleged involvement. And I just gave you a couple of anomalies that are actual anomalies that contradict the report and the FBI. Now, because I believe in hijacked planes or in hijackers themselves, people actually of the truth movement, high profilers, consider me a shill or an agent of some sort. Because I believe that these planes were hijacked. Well, they were hijacked. There were people in United Airlines and American Airlines who actually saw the hijackers on the day themselves. There's video of Dulles Airport regarding 5 hijackers going through screening. And there's a victim, Marie Ray Sopper, going right before where the hijackers are going right through the security screen. Because people like to say that there's no time step on the video. It could have been taken any day. Well, there's a victim of Flight 77 right in the same shot of 2 hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Majid Maqid of Flight 77. So yes, I think these planes were hijacked. And that there were hijackers on these planes. But there are anomalies involving these attacks that were not properly investigated by these congressional inquiries, by the FBI, or were ignored altogether. And so in my closing here today, I would say to those in the truth movement who don't believe in hijackers or hijacked planes or fake phone calls or any of that, that's a dead end. You can't blame anybody. And if you want to really dedicate your time into a more illuminating, revealing project regarding who these hijackers were and what they weren't and what they were portrayed to be, and that leads into the intelligence apparatuses as well, that leads into our foreign policy, the Pentagon, the Israeli AIPAC lobby, the Saudi Gulf lobby. Why are they important? Because they dictate our foreign policy in the Middle East as well as military expansionism. And that leads into a much bigger field for you to investigate. Now you can see that you could go from hijack to intelligence agencies to foreign lobbyists to foreign policy to the military, and all of a sudden it becomes much bigger. And now you have more to investigate, and you can see how the 9/11 attacks were allowed to happen.